Oh, I'm live? Okay, sorry folks. I usually have an intro video that runs, but it only works if I'm paying attention to it. So let me, I just have one slide I want to put in here. And, okay, so here we go. So today we're going to talk about the inverted reality of the woke cartels. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It is, each week it seems like everything gets more and more extreme. So we'll talk about some of the things that are going on. And I think this is what's going to ultimately be a beast system, and we're seeing it unfold. Here's some of the channels that we're on. We talk about the convergence of events, Okay. Is it working now? So here's some of the channels that we're on. Here's the title slide, the inverted realities of the... Now why did it go off again? What's going on here? The inverted realities of the woke cartels. We apologize for the technical... we're all volunteers and we're overpaid, so... Acceleration of events, and I won't go into this, acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding, that's kind of the grid that I see, and sometimes you can say, well, I don't know if the horsemen or the seals related to the four horsemen have opened up, but the horsemen are mounting up, and we can certainly see their shadows being cast in front of us. And this is a graphic I found recently that I love because I think it sort of shows how Bible prophecy is. It's very complicated. This is like a 3D score. And this is how Bible prophecy is. If you looked at it in 3D, it's very layered and it's all interrelated and harmonized. And so the verse for today that we're going to kind of work off of is, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And boy, we see that happening a lot today. There's just this inverted reality that we see among the woke people in our world today. And that's indicative, I think, of the world, the way things are going to be. So let's look at some of the things that are going on now. There's any number of things that I could pick out and say, there's just chaos out there in the economy and world and culture. One of the places where it seems to be manifesting itself is in travel. We know gas prices are way up. I know people that buy gas every day because it's going to be more expensive tomorrow. And I think that I'll play a video clip from a show that was Friday. I think it's not going to get any better anytime soon. And I'll explain a little bit why. I did a midweek update this week. It was under an hour. Barely. Brief. I said I'm going to do a brief one. For me, I said a brief for me. I qualified it. But I talked a little bit about Saudi Arabia, ESG, and that type of thing. And I'll sort of summarize it just a little bit because I think it's important. But this ESG thing that we see everywhere, environment, social, and governance, what they've done is they're making it hard for corporations to get financing to do things like oil and gas exploration. And as a result, it's already having an impact, so there's less oil and gas supply. And we have an oil and supply demand. We have a refinery capacity problem, and that's leading to fuel shortages, and that's leading to, when there's any demand, prices are going to go up. Now, I've also said, I've heard, if I could give you some good news, inflation is hurting, but now stores are hurting because they have inventory because nobody's buying anything. So Target and Walmart have had to revise their earnings forecast because people just aren't buying things. I think it was Walmart a couple weeks ago said, we're changing the way we stock our shelves because people aren't buying gallons of milk anymore. They're buying half gallons because that's all they can afford. we're in a very difficult position, and I don't know when it's going to get better. You have some weather things going on. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's supposed to be over 100 degrees here in a few days in central Ohio before summer starts, official start of summer. But thousands stuck abroad. This is from the Times of London as more flights are axed. Even the Financial Times had a big thing about delays, shortages, and strikes, front page of the National Post. In Canada, air travel, chaos, hell on earth. I thought this graphic, this editorial cartoon from the Times of London was, they've had a lot of political problems. Boris Johnson's had a crisis of confidence in his government because of some scandals, and everything's everywhere you look, everything's in chaos. And this was a graphic of some people looking at the flight board, and they're looking at departures to UK economic gloom, cost of living crisis, record inflation, rail strikes, tube strikes, NHS failings, care home shame, absent GPs. They're having a terrible problem with doctors resigning. A lot of doctors say, I'm 60, I'm out of here, it's not worth it. Brexit deficit, housing shortfall, and the people, and Johnson's still there, and these people are looking at the flight board saying, please don't get us home. Let us stay wherever we are. Now, the word that's being used a lot by people, and I think we're probably there, stagflation. It's not a good situation to be in. Prices are going up, and it's just not good. The Fed's talking about putting some increasing interest rates. That's going to get just a little bit worse. Here's front pages of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal yesterday. Inflation hits a record high, prices up, stock market way down. The worst month in quite a while in the market. So it's just, and there's a lot of problems that contribute to this. Here's a headline. Beijing, this is from the Wall Street Journal, Beijing is back on high alert after COVID outbreak. And so they're just putting these draconian lockdowns on in Shanghai. And they've been going on for well over a month now. They opened up a little bit, now they're putting them back on. North Korea's having problems. Some places are requiring masks indoors again because of outbreaks. It's really come quickly, Lord, is really what you want to say when you hear a lot of this. The cost of China's zero COVID strategy is mounting. That's an editorial from yesterday's Financial Times. Now, there's some questions going on about, is it really COVID that's causing the lockdowns in Shanghai and other places in China? A month ago, there were 400 million people under strict draconian lockdowns in China. People have been committing suicide because they can't get out. It's awful. So there's a couple of different theories. Jeff Nyquist, who's one of the better security analysts that I know and read, you can read his blog at Jeffrey Nyquist. Just Google him. He came out, he put up about a week ago, he put up a transcript of a meeting that took place in one of the provinces in China where they were talking about getting ready for war with America. And the word that Nyquist had got, and I had heard about it about a week before he put it up on his blog, the word is that he had is that the reason for the lockdowns in Shanghai and elsewhere in China are not because of COVID. They're to sort of fool the West into thinking they're from COVID, but they're really being done to retool the plants for war production because they plan on going after Taiwan and maybe China. I have a little article about that here shortly. So that's one reason. That's one thing that people say is going on. Now, I don't know if that's going on. I really don't. I personally would be a little bit surprised if that's what's going on, but who knows? I'm not in China. The other thing that I heard, which I think carries some credibility, is because of these lockdowns, the Chinese economy is very, very bad. It's failing. It's falling. They have overpriced real estate. They have a lot of what we have, but it's like without being the world's reserve currency. And they're trying to control everything, but it's not good in China on the economic side. As a result of that, there's been a lot of rumors that Xi, the dictator that runs the Chinese Communist Party, is being challenged for leadership. There's several factions in China that run things. One of his we noticed the Shanghai faction. The Shanghai faction is being locked down, this theory goes, because Xi is trying to control them and oppress them. That could be true. It could be they're having a COVID problem, or their policy is zero COVID, and that's what they're going to do. They want zero COVID. Now, I've been updating myself on these various, marinetraffic.com is the one that I usually use. This Bay Area here, that's around Shanghai. And this is a screenshot of the marine traffic in the area. The green are container ships. Now, mind you, this is just the port of Shanghai. And it goes inland quite a ways. Look at all the container ships, and then the red are tankers. Now, a month or two ago, I guess 3 months ago, we had hundreds of ships stacked up off the port of Long Beach and Los Angeles in Southern California, and that's just what the screenshot looks like now. There's no ships anchored out there like there were. Because you'll see, like here, you see the ship looks like a ship, and if it's anchored, it's just a circle. So there were dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of ships. They didn't have any spot for them to anchor any more ships. They had to sail around out in the ocean. But what does this tell me? This tells me that we're not getting, I'm trying to think what this, okay. We're not getting container ships coming into the United States. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means there might not be goods to restock the shelves. Now, I'm out shopping. I haven't noticed that much as I'm shopping around. Let me know if you're noticing shortages. I think part of the reason you're not noticing shortages, people just can't afford to buy stuff. It's expensive. I mean, gas is, goodness, it was a couple years ago when there was a different president in charge, and I was over in Springfield, Ohio. I had 10 cents a gallon off, and I paid 93 cents for a gallon of gas. I felt like I'd really accomplished things. Now, this is the marine traffic. This is the coast of Ukraine. Right there in the middle is Mariupol. That was one of the cities that the Russians took over. And what you see there's just no marine traffic going on there. And now Mariupol's a port. They had a steel plant there, and it's just completely shut down. Here's the Black Sea. You see Turkey there in the center, Black Sea above it, the Crimea Peninsula sticking down there off of Ukraine, and then there's a passageway that goes up towards Russia. And you see some ship traffic there, but this usually is just filled with ships. And then they come down through the Bosporus there in Istanbul, and then a little further south down there in the lower left, that's the Dardanelles. Those are narrow passageways. Turkey shut off a lot of ship traffic, container traffic. There's grain that's locked up in Ukraine that's not getting out. That's not good for the world economy, not good for the food situation. This is what also happened in China. Lloyd Austin went over there. Now, I've seen different reports of this. So this is from the Daily Mail. And I will say, you got to be careful sometimes with the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and the Guardian and that type of thing. But you get a lot more news there than you will like off, say, the New York Times or elsewhere. But this was one, China threatens defense secretary with war. And they were saying, listen, we're going after Ukraine. Don't you dare say that Ukraine is independent. we're planning, and I showed you a video of a drone, artificial intelligence-driven drone carrier that China's putting in play. China's been practicing amphibious landings. China has 1.4 billion people. Taiwan has 20 million. So I don't know that Taiwan would fare any better in a war than the Ukrainians are. I mean, the Ukrainians did okay at the beginning, but now they're running out of stuff, and Russia's been able to replenish, and they're killing a lot of people. I'm seeing reports of 50, 60 to 100, 200 Ukrainian soldiers are being killed every day. They're just being pummeled. It's turned into an artillery war, and Russia has artillery and Ukraine doesn't. So it's pretty bad, but they're threatening that our defense secretary went over there, and the Chinese generals were just saying, we're going after them. Now, when I read another report, I think this was from the Wall Street Journal, U.S.-China defense chiefs dial down tension on Taiwan. So I'm like, well, no, wait a minute. Were they threatening war, or are they dialing down the tension? So it's like everything else in the news now. You have to source things through multiple places. It's hard to figure out what the truth is and whether you're being given propaganda. I mentioned this earlier. Heat wave roasting Texas, records broken in Arizona. Saw some place in Phoenix last night at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. It was over 100 degrees. That's hot. And it's supposed to be 100 or more here in central Ohio in a couple days. So all of this has an impact. In Europe, because of dry conditions, the wheat crop in Europe is way down. Well, they need that, right? Our Texas winter wheat last year was down. We have drought in the United States. This heat is not going to help it. I was watching videos of people out at Lake Mead and outside of Las Vegas, and the levels have gone down so much that the boat ramps don't work anymore, unless you have if your boat will float in 4 inches of water without scraping the propellers and everything, then you can launch your boat. But the ramps are like a couple hundred yards from water. So they have makeshift ramps, but they're not steep enough for people to get their boats in. And there's just no water. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they're finding all these barrels and old cars and bodies and that type of thing in Lake Mead, which really makes you want to go to Vegas and drink the water, right? But they treat it before they give it to you. But we're having a major heat wave all across the United States. That's going to affect crops. It's not even really officially summer yet. So here's a little, and you'll see an article on the left on the next slide that says, famine. The world is on the brink of famine. I think that's accurate. And then on War Room with Steve Bannon, a guy named Dave Walsh was on, and it's a couple-minute clip I'm just going to play where he talks about energy and food crisis and what's going on.
Dave Walsh, walk us through your assessment of the numbers today in the underlying converging energy crisis that we have that I believe, sir, and you would agree with me, is only going to make things a whole lot worse. Dave Walsh.
Well, it is indeed the case. There was a publication by Zero Hedge a couple days ago projecting by several experts that we're liable to see $155 per barrel oil soon enough. And there are a lot of indications that's probably true. Typically, you've got a winter peak in oil and gas demand that drives prices up, and you've got a summer peak. We're just now heading into the summer peak. July, August, September are the months when natural gas tracks up in price historically, as does fuel oil, because of excessive transportation, given holidays, et cetera, the vacation season. But now the massively increased dependence of our electrical system on natural gas, 39%, which in the heavy air conditioning load states, you've got massive dependence on that you didn't have back 20 years ago. So yeah, there's a lot of upward price pressure that would say $155 a barrel is where we might be headed easily. The other thing is too to remember that there's a correlation between the price of natural gas and oil. It's a very tight correlation. So as oil's driven up, unfortunately, natural gas tends to follow. So it's just, all of the public narrative of including Republican politicians, including corporatists, that basically this spin that we're so now dependent on renewables. No. The total energy consumption in the United States, transportation, all in, electricity, gas, 4% of it, 4% of the supply of energy in this country, for example, is wind and solar. 96% is not. It remains a very fossil fuel-based economy. So these price spikes are hugely problematic for us and our way of life and our industrial competitiveness. Hugely problematic.
How does this also flow through everything else? The plastics, the fertilizer, the food, everything else is driven off this. This is the basic foundation of an industrial economy. And these guys, this happy talk and not just this, even if they were trying to do a transition, how irresponsible this has been to take capacity offline, refining capacity offline. Now you've got crisis in diesel, natural gas is through the roof. Oil is going to go to $150. I said 175. I said 150 by Labor Day, maybe 175. And people are talking it could be 200, right? And you think your life's changed now? Also, natural gas, of everybody taking all the air conditioning in Florida and Texas, California and Nevada, driven by natural gas, it gets so expensive, boom, that all comes offline. How does this converge into a massive crisis that clearly the Biden administration ideologically, first off, their competence, they can't deal with it, but ideologically, they're cornered in with this Greta Thunberg radical, and basically a way to take down capitalism, which is the Green New Deal. Dave Walsh.
Energy costs are in the center of manufacturing virtually anything. Cement plants, steel plants. I was in the turbine building business. Even the factories, I had to build gas turbines themselves and steam turbines. The energy input, the electricity cost, and the gas costs were always in the top 5 of the cost profile of things you worried about running a large factory. Automaking, everything, not to mention, of course, the products, the plastics, all of the fertilizers, which is a huge separate issue on food cost. Energy is at the core of manufacturing competitiveness. By the way, the Chinese way know that. They're very intimate with that. So when we pressurize all of this renewables stuff, and they're in the middle of the supply chain of that, you kind of wonder why that is, and it's not a mystery. But you've now had years of bullying by the Obama administration, prior administrations, the deep state in terms of the Trade Commission, in terms of the EPA, in terms of the Department of the Interior, that have taken track. And I mentioned the alphabet soup of regulations on coal, the MATS rules, the cross-state pollution rules. There were 7 key EPA initiatives pushed by the Obama administration with the purpose, goal, and objective stated by Energy Secretary Chu at the beginning of his first administration, targeted at shuttering coal as an electric generating capacity in this country. That was their mission. They said that. They achieved that through regulatory measures in the EPA. Now, we're not done with coal, but it's shrunken from 51% of our electric power base down to about 20%. Did spike up last year in the first year of the administration when gas got expensive. But all of these coal plant close downs were a direct result of administration activities prior to Donald Trump in the Obama administration on forcing EPA regulations to make coal non-competitive. And they said that's why they were doing it. They were very out there with that. So you bring that to present time. Why are the majors slow walking, investing in new capacity in oil and gas right now, even though prices are high? They don't trust that this war is over. This war against them regulatorily is way not over. Look at Senator Manchin's hearing in the Senate Committee on Energy just a week ago, and the Secretary of the Interior's comments. They know the signal's out there.
They sat right there and lied to it. This is why you got to get Kelly Chewbacca elected out there. You got to throw Murkowski out there. Murkowski voted for that. Lied. Sat there right there. Lied right to Manchin's face. Manchin had to pull the letter up and said, "Ma'am, I'm sitting here with your letter." They will look you in the eye and lie to you. Real quickly, Dave, this summer, the long, hot summer that you forecasted, they're talking now, they're spending, we're going to get our hands on this. And I'm not asking you to put a number on it because I know you're going to run your own math. But how do you think August, we're going to be in better shape in August than we are today, or worse shape?
No, you typically have oil and gas, but now compounded by the fact that we're heavily electricity dependent on natural gas. The spike periods of the year in pricing always are January, February, March, and July, August, September. Those are the spike periods, especially the summer, when demand nationally rises, and also Western Europe the same. Vacation season, holiday season, more driving, but more air conditioning. Therefore, that's a price spike season. No, we're headed into higher prices cyclically anyhow in a normative year. And by the way, I will say also this, and this was pointed out in this forum, the War Room, a couple of months ago. The new collaboration of Russia with OPEC, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia specifically, that's powerful. That's a very powerful impact on global pricing. That's 22 million barrels a day between the two of them. If they stay united on pricing policy, and the political actions we've taken with Russia in the last 3 months would say that animus against us is going to last a long time. That's a force to be reckoned with. 22 million barrels a day priced at $150. I'm not forecasting any relief on that for political reasons that we've helped cause. Therefore, we've got to be looking at some new solutions on incenting production in this country, in Canada, in Mexico, looking at converging North America's massive resource pool of electricity and fuel in gas and oil as a way. We have collectively here enough resource capacity to combat that. So if we're going to yield, we shouldn't join OPEC. We ought to be fighting them. The way to do that is with the North American Alliance.
So I'll talk a little bit to sort of summarize what I talked about on my midweek update on Thursday, the Russian-Saudi alliance that he thought it's a little bit deeper than he intimated there. And I'll just briefly summarize that for you. You can go watch my update from Thursday, which I went through and explained the Saudi involvement in that. But this is an article, hard to find an article in a newspaper about this anti-abortion, they call it anti-abortion center. It's a pro-life center. It's a pregnancy crisis counseling center that they will help women that are pregnant. They'll get them help pay their medical bills. They'll provide free medical care. They'll provide prenatal, after birth care. They'll help the woman adopt the child. They'll help them with some early expenses in raising the child. It's a wonderful organization. And as I was researching a clinic like this, I kept coming up with these articles out of these left-wing propaganda newspapers like the New York Times and elsewhere that were saying, oh, these people that do it, they don't really do that. They're just a bunch of grifters. They're just in it for the money. And it's the inverted reality that we live in. So here's this clinic, it's firebombed. I heard the guy interviewed, I think it was on Glenn Beck the other day, and he said, listen, we help women out. We don't charge them anything. We're not making any money. We're helping. It's a mission for us. This was spray painted. Jane was here. That's Jane Roe, I guess. Daily Mail, again, you have to go to the UK to find something about this. This is the pro-abortion Kristallnacht. And there have been these clinics firebombed, arson committed all over the country. Not a lot of them, but enough. The question is, what's going on, and why aren't you hearing about it? You never hear CNN talk about it. You never read about it in the New York Times. You can dig it out of a local newspaper or a local news channel because what are they doing? This is the great narrative. They're controlling the narrative. Did you hear Nancy Pelosi at the January 6th, before the January 6th hearings the other night? She came right out and said, we want to create the narrative. We want to tell you what to believe about everything, even though it doesn't have any relationship to reality. What's interesting in this is that New York State has now proposed a law. And the law has been introduced by the great pro-life governor in New York who's not been elected yet. She just succeeded in office when the other guy resigned because of scandal. And what they want to do is they want to investigate clinics like this that was firebombed in Buffalo. They want to investigate abortion clinics. They want to investigate these other clinics because they're trying to drive them out of business. Look at what this law says. As used in this act, limited services pregnancy center means a facility or entity, these are the ones that are subject to the act, being subpoenaed, give us all of your documents, your records, your list of donors, etc., including a mobile facility, the primary purpose of which is to provide services to clients who are or may be pregnant, and then they say that, and they are going to identify them a little more, is not providing services under the direction of a healthcare provider and fails to provide or refer for the full range of comprehensive reproductive and sexual health care services reimbursed under the state's Medicaid program, including but not limited to contraception, testing, and treatment of sexually transmitted infections, abortion care, and prenatal care. So if you don't offer all of those, then you're subject to being investigated. So who are they going after? They're not going after Planned Parenthood. They don't care about Planned Parenthood. They fund Planned Parenthood. Whether pregnancy centers hold themselves out to the public through community participation or events or through their advertising or websites as medical facilities or entities in which comprehensive all-option pregnancy counseling is provided. So in other words, they think that people are saying, hey, we'll counsel you about abortion, we'll help you get abortion and that type of thing. And that's not what they do. They don't advertise themselves that way. But see, they're making up a narrative, and they're going to try to drive these companies, these entities out of business. And then this, Brian sent me this morning, the global decline of the fertility rate. 70 years ago, the average woman had 5 children. Since then, the number has halved. And it's worse than that. So you still have Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Pakistan, they're 3.4 and above, all the way up to Niger at 6.7. And that's why when you see population projections, the Lord doesn't return, Africa is just going to explode. They're going to have cities in Africa, like 5 cities that have over 100 million people in them. I mean, it's shocking. And they may not stay there, though, if there's not development. But if there is development, they're going to be using what? Fossil fuels and then the climate change and all this other stuff. They've created an impossible situation. So the world is at 2.4. Replacement is 2.1 per women. U.S. is 1.8. South Korea is 1.1. Ukraine, Russia, 1.3. The fastest decline in fertility rates in human history has been in Iran. And I think this is an important thing, the demographics of the end times that we need to think about, that some of these countries are looking at. Iran is looking at. Russia, I think, was one of the reasons why Russia decided to go into Ukraine was their birth rate is way down. And if they're going to do something on Ukraine, they're going to do it. They're going to have to do it now, because if they wait 10 years, they may not have the manpower to do that. They're already bringing people into the army that are like over the age of 40. So this is a problem. So down in Tasmania and Australia, they're putting in this anti-conversion practice law that, you can't counsel somebody not to be, to not change their gender or to change their sexual orientation. You can counsel them to do that, to change their gender, but you can't counsel them not to do it. It's upside down reality. By the way, go watch Matt Walsh's. You might be able to find a free copy someplace. If not, pay for it, subscribe at the Daily Wire. His "What is a Woman?" It's very well done, and it exposes them for what they are. And of course, this is Pride Month. There's big celebrations going on. Somebody sent me this. Here is a T-shirt. There are more than 2 genders. But then look to the right there, fit type. men or women. So there are only two gender options on the fit, but there are more than two genders. So somebody tells me that shirt may be false advertising or overstating the case. Here's another one. And again, you can see they have men and women. Now, the New York Times, New York Times won't report on a clinic in the state of New York that gets firebombed. It's like it doesn't exist. But here was a report that came out from I think it's the Williams Center at UCLA Law School in California. Number of transgender youth has doubled over the last few years. Doubled. Here's what the report looks like. Well, this is from their 2017 report. Here's their I guess this is their 2022 report. You can go to the Williams Center, UCLA Williams Institute, and get those reports. And here's some summaries. Nearly 1 in 5 people who identify as transgender are ages 13 to 17. So that's 20% of transgender people are 13 to 17, even though they're less than 10% of the population. The percentage and number of adults who identify as transgender in the U.S. has remained steady over time. So it's not an increasing problem among adults, but it is among young people. And they'll say, it's not a problem, John. You're a bigot, you're transphobic and all of this. Our estimate of the number of youth who identify as transgender has doubled from our previous estimate in 2017, over 5 years. Something's going on. And it's pushed, it's normalized. But you can't, they're doing what Matt Walsh calls genital mutilation surgeries on teenagers. They're cutting off body parts or remaking new body parts. And if you have somebody I'll see in a discussion group, somebody will say, well, I had top surgery. I had my breast removed and I wish I hadn't. Oh, you're making it up. Somebody's paying you to say that, you transphobic person. It's just absolutely shocking what's going on. Now, there is some good news. This left-wing prosecutor in San Francisco, his parents were in the Weather Underground. They did a firebombing. People were killed. They went to prison. He was then effectively an orphan. And DA Chase Bowden, he was recalled this week in San Francisco by a decisive margin. Even in liberal San Francisco, it gets so bad that they can't put up with this. Because why? Because it affects the quality of life. He was raised, by the way, by Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. Bill Ayers was the education expert. Bernadine Dorn was at may still be at Northwestern University Law School. And that was the home where Barack Obama went to have his first fundraiser when he ran for president or Senate. I don't remember which. And those are the people, Weathermen Underground radicals, radical leftists that raised this guy. And then he was heavily funded by Soros. Now, I've mentioned this a lot in the past. This is the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin that was published on February 7th of this year by the Department of Homeland Security. And it talked about one of the things we had to address this because we had misinformation, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So misinformation is you might make a mistake, you didn't really mean it. Disinformation, you're at least grossly negligent in doing it. And malinformation, you really are intending to mislead people. And it related to, yes, election fraud or Charlie Vector 019er. And then they appointed that gal who we lovingly refer to as Scary Poppins and the misinformation propaganda nanny who resigned. But she went on all these shows and she said, we're not doing anything. We're just trying to make sure that good information is out there on the internet. Well, Senators Grassley and Cotton came out and they have this report what they did was they got a lot of the memorandum, and this goes back to September. So the bulletin comes out in February. Back in September, they were talking about all the things that they were going to do. And one of the things they were going to do was they came up with a DHS, Department of Homeland Security, Disinformation Governance Board charter. So everything that this lady said, Nita Jankowicz, was a lie. This is a propaganda control. It's to control speech and information. Speaking of propaganda, now, look, I have mixed emotions about this January 6th hearing. I haven't read the response. Jonah, I got an email from a list. It was Jonah Goldberg. I like Jonah Goldberg. I used to read his stuff. And I wrote back an email when I got it and said, I commented on it, and he's written back. I haven't had time to look at it yet. He actually responded to it, or somebody on his staff did. But what this is all about is they don't want Trump to run again. And I don't know whether Trump should run again or not. That's sort of beside the point. Peter Navarro, who was a advisor to President Trump and was in charge of the Charlie Vector policy, and understand that there is I think sort of a prophecy-related timing here. In January of 2020, they came out in the morning with the Trump peace plan for the Middle East. And within hours, and Bill Koenig at watch.org has documented this, within hours, everything's starting to melt down because of this Charlie Vector thing. Lockdowns, masks, they start vaccine development and rollout. Well, Navarro wasn't really involved with the January 6th or election thing that much, but he was working for the president. And in our government, the Department of Justice has a memo out there that says people in the government, the executive branch, have an executive privilege. They don't have to respond to subpoenas from Congress, because if they did, they'd be running up there all the time. So what they did in a very clever sleight of hand was Biden came in and said, well, I'm the executive now, and I'm waiving the privilege for the Trump administration. Now, if it was the other way, do you think a court would allow that to stand? So they waived the privilege. Navarro said, no, I have executive privilege. I don't have to produce this stuff. And now he's been filed criminal contempt charges. He called up the FBI and said, do you want me to come down? Where can I meet you? And all this stuff. And they sent a team to his house, shackled him, everything, and threw him in a jail cell for a while. Because this is being done. Listen, if you guys mess with us on anything, if you question our narrative, we're going to ruin your life. And he's going to spend well into six figures, well over $100,000 in legal fees on this. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to bankrupt people. Now, I don't know if he's a wealthy guy or not. That's beside the point. Even Alan Dershowitz came out and says he has a strong claim of executive privilege. But this is, again, the inverted reality of these woke elites. Even in the Times of London today, there's an editorial that says elites are the real problem in the United States, not conspiracy theorists. That's kind of interesting. Now, we have this problem, this kind of juggernaut with, this is a graphic from the 2017 Economist, and that's to represent the data mining and control that goes on by tech companies. That's 5 years old. Some of those are not the largest companies in the world anymore, but you get the point that, and I think the stuff that's coming off of there are zeros and ones in that graphic. And this is a big problem. They talk about the Web 3.0. There's actually to show the sort of the spiritual nature of this. This comes from the MIT Press Reader, and this is an article written by Ingemar Patrick Linden. And listen to this. This is somebody who's speaking on tech issues. This is where this is going. What do we know the Bible says? For it is appointed unto man once to die, right? After this, the judgment. The idea is intuitive. It is good to be alive. It is bad to die. Yet many, even most, resist this idea, not just because they believe in an afterlife. Some of the resistance comes from the worries about what would happen to the world if we live much longer. Overpopulation, stagnation, Social Security, pension crises. These are reasonable concerns. Something that appears to be good for the individual can have such bad effects for society that in the end it is good for no one. But more commonly, people appear to accept that death comes after a full life. They do not object to death, only untimely death. And so now he's writing about the fact that they are trying to get rid of death. So do you understand the philosophical basis behind this? So when I play you a clip of Yuval Harari, the medieval history professor from, I don't know if he's still there, Tel Aviv University, or Hebrew, I don't know if Tel Aviv or Hebrew, I think it's Tel Aviv University. And he writes that he goes to Silicon Valley in 2015, and he says, I love coming to Silicon Valley because it is here in Silicon Valley that the religions that will control the world in the 21st century are being created. Understand, there is a huge spiritual component to this. That seems to be a fulfillment of what the Bible says: we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Now, whether these people are able to do this is almost beside the point. The point is they're trying. Here's the head of Ethereum, who recently said in an interview that he was looking to develop soul-bound tokens, building blocks for a Web3 decentralized society, with Web.3 trending towards hyper-financialization and commoditization. Leading lights in the space have proposed an alternative model built upon emergent networks by bottom-up communities with rich social identity. And it'll be called Web3. And the tech companies are big. Look at this graphic. This is from a couple years ago of the world's biggest companies. Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Facebook, now Meta. Now, this has changed dramatically over the last couple of months. The largest company is Saudi Arabia's Aramco, which is oil. And that's kind of interesting. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But oil is a big deal. In fact, let me just summarize briefly what I did in my update on Wednesday. Then I'll talk about oil in the Middle East and a couple other things that are going on in there, and we'll be out of here. So I am of the mind, and Ralph read Psalm 83 for the scripture reading first hour, that this Psalm 83, so there's a big controversy in the prophecy community. Is it a prophecy? Is it not a prophecy? Was it fulfilled? Has it not been fulfilled? At a minimum, though, I think it lays out a condition that there will be people conspiring against Israel, that her name will be blotted out and remembered no more. So we have to kind of start with that at the beginning. And so what you're seeing through the Abraham Accords, and that's what I called my update, Saudi Arabia, ESG, NEOM, and the Abraham Accords, and they're all kind of interconnected. And what you find, though, is that the brains behind ESG is, in large part, a couple of countries, Saudi Arabia and Russia. Now, Russia is funding left-wing groups to put in place ESG requirements on companies. This is happening all over. I went to a legal seminar a week ago where they were talking about ESG. This is so important, we have to do this. And what does ESG stand for? Environmental, social, and governance. So there is this organization in Saudi Arabia called the Future Investment Initiative Institute that has been holding meetings. And in those meetings, there was a guy who got up at one of the meetings a couple of years back, and he said, listen, there are three great, well, here's what he said. You'll see that they've all got these vision statements. Saudi Arabia Vision 2030, what's the UN 2030? You see how they're all sort of adopting this. And a guy got up at the FII Institute meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and he said this.
First three editions of the Future Investment Initiative.
Now we are one of the top 3 global gatherings.
And you hear what he said. We're now one of the top 3 global gatherings. And what are those global gatherings? Well, we know we have the World Economic Forum in Davos. We know we have the World Government Summit in United Arab Emirates. And it's interesting, United Arab Emirates is one of the first Arab countries to sign on to the Abraham Accords. And now we have the great, and so here's Klaus Schwab at the World Government Summit. I thought he was Davos. Well, he's also at the World Government Summit. And when you talk about ESG, so he goes there, this is 2019. This is just 1 minute. You can bear through 1 minute of this guy. This is what he says, and you'll see he doesn't say ESG, but he's going to get the environmental component, he's going to get the social component, he's going to get the governance component, ESG. Here's what he said.
What does it mean, globalization 4.0? Definitively, it has to be more sustainable. We cannot continue to destroy our environment. It has to be more inclusive. Those people who have lost the hope for a better future, they have to be given a new vision. They don't want to wake up with nightmares. They want to wake up with dreams. We need a more multi-stakeholder globalization, which means a globalization not led just by governments, but where solutions are elaborated jointly by all stakeholders of society.
So there you go. So he got them. Got environmental through sustainability. He got governance through inclusiveness, or social through inclusiveness, and he got governance through stakeholders. Somebody sent me one of those memes, or sent me some information about they're really trying to promote veganism around the world. And I said, if they're bringing in veganism, I'm going to demand to be a stakeholder. STEAK holder. So you have those two things. You have Davos, you have the World Government Summit at UAE, and then you have the FII Institute, Impact on Humanity, meeting in Saudi Arabia, instituted by the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. But there's a fourth one. In fact, it's probably the most attended of all of these global gatherings, and it's called SPEEF, St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And so here you see a few years ago, there's Klaus Schwab and Vladimir Putin at the St. Petersburg conference. And their conference is coming up. I think it's June 20th or 22nd for a couple days. And you'll see Schwab going to Russia, meeting with Putin. And there he is. Look, I mean, I think this is the, that long table that Putin's got. This is the version of it with when all the leaves are removed. They just kind of spread it out and put it in a bigger room. Kind of looks like the same table. Anyway, but look, Russia and Saudi Arabia are big deals when it comes to natural gas. Russia has the most, Iran the second, Venezuela's down there at number 8. And then when you look at oil, Venezuela's up there, and Venezuela was signing a 20-year agreement with Iran just yesterday or the day before. And so they have this environmental, social, and governance, and this is being pushed by Saudi Arabia and Russia. And what does it do? Think of ESG as the social credit score for corporations. Larry Fink from BlackRock, China's pushing it, BlackRock is pushing it because they have a lot of China connections. So whatever credit score we're worried about they're giving to individuals. ESG is the credit score for companies. And so they're getting scored down if they're in oil and gas development. But wait a minute, I thought you said that Russia and Saudi Arabia were behind this, and they're the biggest in oil and the second largest in, the biggest in gas and the second largest in oil. So why would they be pushing against the development of oil and gas? It's not their oil and gas, it's your oil and gas. And what happens? You just heard Dave Walsh. You have a supply problem, supply and demand. Oil, gas production goes down, the price goes up, and what happens? Saudi Arabia ends up with multiple billions of dollars more. Now the largest privately traded company in the world is Aramco. That just happened over a couple months. You think in Russia, the ruble is higher than it's ever been in terms of value, despite all this stuff. So here we are, so you see how this is all sort of coming together. Now, the other thing that, the reason why this is kind of relevant to the Abraham Accords, this line represents the upcoming city of Neom. This is a brainchild of Mohammed bin Salman. He's pushing it. Now, when it's first started, everybody said, he's not going to be able to do anything with that. They can't afford it. It's too costly. They're going to spend $500 billion building this. But guess what? The world changed. ESG took effect. All of a sudden, Saudi Arabia has a lot more money. Now, part of the reason this is important is because of these two islands down here and where Neom sits. So if you see those two islands, you see the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula, and you go to the right, those are those two islands, and then there's a line that goes, 60, 70, 100 miles into Saudi Arabia, which is Neom. They've got a golf course built, they've built a resort and some other things. It's going to be a surface, environmentally sensitive city. Everything's going to be underground. But now what's happening is those islands have really been under the control of Egypt. Saudi Arabia wants them back. Egypt's been delaying that, but now they're going to give them back to Saudi Arabia. But there's a problem because in the Six-Day War in 1967, one of the causes of this was because Egypt was blockading the Gulf of Aqaba, which goes along Saudi Arabia up to the top there, which is Eilat. There's a Egyptian city, a Jordanian city, and in the middle there's the Israeli city of Eilat. And it's a major port, and it was blockaded by the Egyptians. And this was a big cause of the Six-Day War. And when the settlement of the Six-Day War took place, Egypt agreed, and it ended up in the Abraham Accords as well, that they would protect Israel's rights to have access all the way through the Gulf of Aqaba. Well, Saudi Arabia wants those islands back. They're going to build a bridge across there to Egypt, but they've kind of got to get Israel's approval to do this. So this is a big deal right now that there's this negotiation going on. This was in the Jerusalem Post a week ago. They're trying, and a lot of people think this might lead to a normalization of the relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia. They're going to allow some overflights. People hear that and they think, oh, they'll allow military overflights. I don't think that's there. These are some of the headlines from May of 1967 about the blockade. And eventually, Israel won the war. Nasser resigned. And Nasser, he came in. There was a humiliating defeat for the Egyptians, Jordanians, and Syrians. The Russians were against it. And Nasser, the dictator in charge of Egypt, resigned. But within 15 hours, they were bringing him back. So Mohammed bin Salman wants this because he wants to build this city called the Line. And it's kind of interesting geographically. I have another video. You can see it in I guess the Thursday update I did it. This mountain range that it goes across there on the right, if you go north a little bit, that's where Jebel al-Lawz is. That's what a lot of people believe is the real Mount Sinai. Now, you get in a big argument with people if you say that, because there's good, solid archaeologists who think that's just absolute nonsense. I kind of lean towards it myself. We'll see, but it's interesting that Saudi Arabia is doing this, and I think Saudi Arabia is an end-time player, and it's not going anywhere. And so they have this ESG stuff that they're putting in. Look at their new seminar that they're having, this gathering they're having. Well, this was in May. I'm sorry, that's the wrong. Their next meeting. Hang on. I mean, they look at what they're into, the global infectious disease index. They're into, guess what? Preventing the next global pandemic. They're into the metaverse. And they're going to have a meeting in the fall. I don't see my slide for it. It's called the New World Order. I'm sure it's just, well, there are no conspiracies, but there are coincidences. So it's a big deal. So gas and oil is a big deal too. Now, this is going on right now as we speak between Israel and Lebanon. This is Energean. It's a company, and they have this giant drilling platform. And right now I think it's being leased to Israel. And so last week, it traversed through the Suez Canal. You can see it's a big, big drilling platform. And it was taken up off the coast of Israel around Haifa and put into service at this Karish field. You see it there in the upper right-hand corner. And then you see the border between Israel and Lebanon. And that's a very heavily disputed thing. So the Arab press has been all over this. They're saying Israel's trying to steal our gas. It was front page news in the Al Akbar the other day. They're trying to steal our gas. It's also on a page where they have this other article where they're essentially talking about that Israel has a major threat in the north. And there's possibly a coming war. So you had, so now the question is Israel stealing the gas? So the gray area is under dispute. Lebanon says the border's there. Israel says the border's the blue line, Lebanon the green. And this thing, the satellite images show that this drilling platform is south of that border, the green line. But that doesn't stop good old, a lot of really cool graphics out there about, how these gas fields work and everything. Amos Hochstein from the United States State Department is involved in this. And here is a speech that Nasrallah gave. Israel's a terrorist entity. This was the other day from his bunker. We will never forget the blood of our martyrs, certainly, but we're neither seeking a confrontation nor a war. We don't want a war, but if a confrontation occurs, we will also confront. And if you impose a war, we will too engage in a war. And so this is the common rhetoric that he has. However, I will say clearly, if you strike our cities, we will strike your cities. If you strike our villages, we will strike your settlements. So there's a concern among Israel. It's a legitimate concern that Hezbollah has thousands and thousands of rockets. Last year, when there was the dispute between Gaza and Israel, there were about 4,000 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel over a 2-week period. In the Lebanon war back in 2006, there were about 4,500 rockets fired from Lebanon into Israel. The concern among Israel, now of course Israel has Iron Dome. They're developing this laser technology, but that only has maybe a 2-kilometer range. So you got to be right by where the missile's coming from or going. It heats it up and explodes it. They're developing that. I mean, it's amazing technology, but the concern is that there will be over 4,500 rockets a day. Iron Dome is expensive. Each one of those missiles that's sent up by Iron Dome cost about $50,000 to $100,000. It would be very easy to completely get Israel out of the supply of those rockets in a very short period of time. So you see a lot of articles in the Lebanon press and Arab press about this disputed border area and how Israel's trying to steal the Lebanon's gas. And of course, Turkey gets involved. Turkey has this doctrine called the Blue Homeland, and you can see the sort of bright blue area there around Turkey. Most countries, a lot of countries are signatories to an international treaty with regard to the sea. Turkey is not, so Turkey says, well, that's our homeland, and that's what we want. And then they enter into these arrangements. So Israel wants to build a pipeline, and they'll be very expensive. And it would not get a very good ESG score, I can guarantee you that, to get gas to Europe. And Europe, there's been some agreements signed recently. They want to do this East Med pipeline, but it will cost at least $10 billion. It'll take at least 5 years. So it's not going to solve anybody's crisis quickly. It could be possible that they could pipe it to Saudi Arabia or to Egypt that has some liquefied natural gas platforms, and then it could be shipped to Europe. But there's a capacity issue there. Turkey comes in and they put up these exclusive economic zones to block the pipeline. And so Turkey, of course, well, we have a solution to you. All you need to do, Israel, you just need to build a pipeline up here to Turkey and we'll take care of it. By the way, there's a fee for transiting your gas across Turkey, but you're going to have to pay to build the pipeline, so pay us. And Turkey's engaged in some major disputes right now with all of the people around. Their economy is teetering. So this is all very interesting from a Bible prophecy standpoint because of the conflicts that are occurring. So here's some more. This is an army commander, Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We will destroy Tel Aviv, Haifa, in case you make a wrong move. Haidari said the usurper of Zionist regime has occupied Muslim lands, and these lands will return to Islam in less than 25 years. He went on to say that the military and defense achievements of the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran are a thorn in the enemy's eyes. And then you've seen these other things, there's constant release of videos by, this is a graphic I made up from the front page of Al Akbar a week ago talking about this, the drones that Iran claims it has. Now, some of these might be prototypes. Some of them, there's one that has a cruise missile that they say they'll be able to launch from. This is kind of a game changer. Seth Fransman had an article in Friday's Jerusalem Post about Iran's drone war over Iraq is getting dangerous. There was an attack in Erbil up in the Kurdish area in northern Iraq. There was an attack on Wednesday. Ayatollah Khamenei, he gives a speech. Zionism is an obvious plague for the world of Islam, which should be exposed. And so what they've been coming out, they've been issuing these statements and speeches decrying the normalization that's taking place between Arab states and Israel. Iran appears, here's another, these are some tweets from Khamenei on he can tweet this stuff, we got to get rid of Israel, but you can't, the whole thing is crazy. So these are tweets that he's making. Israel is at the same time making plans about Iran. Iran has removed surveillance cameras for IAEA. The reports are that they're now enriching uranium to 90% purity, which is sufficient for a nuclear weapon. So now the question is, how soon will they have a breakout nuclear weapon? A think tank issued a report and said they're at zero breakout time now. It's probably 6 to 8 months. Might be 2 months, but we've been hearing this for years. At some point, they're going to be ready to go. And Israel's going to have to do something. So they've been upgrading their military attack plans. They've had a lot of meetings. Naftali Bennett had some comments about the Israeli laser. Said, listen, we can shoot down your, rockets that cost tens of thousands of dollars with $3.50 of electricity to run our laser. Assuming they get enough lasers and they get them in enough places and they improve the range on them. That's a big if. They've also, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I was somewhat skeptical about an immediate attack on Iran because of range of their fighter jets. They've now modified the fighter jets, the F-35, so that they can make it to Iran without refueling. Now, I've heard they can make it there and back. I'm not sure that that's right. I'm still trying to figure out if that's exactly what they said. But they can make it to Iran without refueling. They've put external drop tanks on them. They've used these on other fighter jets before. Now, the problem on the F-35 is the reason why it's been delayed on our side in developing for the United States F-35s is putting those drop tanks on an F-35. It's a stealth fighter. It's not supposed to show up on radar, and you start putting extra things on there and people can find it. So Israel, they're smart. They'll figure a way around this. But understand that things are very, very tense between Israel and its neighbors right now. There was an attack the other day. Well, Naftali Bennett, he made a trip to United Arab Emirates to meet with, I call him MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed. He's the president of the United Arab Emirates. His brother was, but he just died recently. And so Naftali Bennett went there to meet with him. The Israeli government, of course, is hanging by a thread. We don't know how much longer it's going to be in place. Then a couple days ago, the Damascus International Airport in Syria was attacked. Now, nobody said who it is, but everybody has said it must be Israel. And it was a pretty dramatic attack. It damaged some of the runways. Syria has said it's going to be at least 10 days till the airport opens. Here's a satellite shot. Here's another satellite shot where you can see the runways, particularly those used by military aircraft. And this is where they fly in materials, arms, weapons, precision-guided radars, lasers, that type of thing, to Syria from Iran. So Israel is interfering with this. Moscow condemns Syria for their attack on Damascus. And here you see these articles. We are compelled to reiterate that the ongoing Israeli shelling of the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic in violation of the basic norms of international law is absolutely unacceptable. So here's an article talking about the upgrade. Israel also came out with a sixth-generation missile that comes from a company called Rafael. And this missile is, updating they're getting ready for war. There's also a article in the press today. Excuse me. And so Israel, when they make this attack, they're going to have to take out, missile defense. They're going to take out aircraft defense. They're going to have to take out radar and all of this stuff. So it's going to be a multi-pronged attack. It's going to be difficult. I think if anybody can do it. But then the problem is this. So here's Defense Ministry orders hundreds of IAI combat all-terrain vehicles. Well, why would they need that if they're attacking Iran? Because what happens is everything's going to break loose in the Arab communities in Israel. You're going to have incursions across the Lebanon border in the north. You're going to have people kidnapped. You're going to have riots in Arab cities. And so all of this is going to have to be taken. And you're going to have rockets coming in from Gaza. It's going to be a big mess. So it's just something to watch. I don't know how quickly things are going to unfold, but it is going to be a big deal. And then there was this report that came out from the UN. And of course, guess what the UN had to say about Israel? The report says, this is from Arab News, occupation by Israel is the root cause of all violence in Israel. Of course, I mean, what else would you expect them to say? Report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory. So you see a couple things going on. You see incredible tension between Israel and Iran. You see normalization push by Saudi Arabia with Israel. How soon that will go, I don't think you'll see anything until the king dies. The king has tied that anything with Israel to a Palestinian state. But when the king dies, the new king can do what he wants. And Mohammed bin Salman seems to be more, the crown prince seems to be more open to that than others. Look, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates would have never gotten into an agreement with Israel unless Saudi Arabia approved of it. That's for sure. And they're allowing overflights now of Saudi Arabia of Israeli commercial aircraft. This is an incredible thing. So you have the UN still against Israel, and then you have Turkey. I recommend a couple articles at the Gatestone Institute. Well, they're in there. Iran's making threats. The interesting graphic in the, Turkey is making threats against Greece, against Syria, against Iraq, and somebody else, I think Iran, all at the same time. And so Turkey has its own view. In fact, Erdogan took to tweeting in Greek the other day about, hey, we warn Greece once again to be prudent to stay away from dreams, rhetoric, and actions that will lead to results for which it will regret, as happened a century ago. That was the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923. And they're still fighting it. I mean, they have long memories. Look at some of these headlines, though. This is from talk about wars and rumors of war. Look at the Arab News. Libya capital rocked by heavy fighting between rival militias. Iraqis demand jobs. Anger grows in Iraq over jobs, food, and water. Lebanese civilians suffer harm from flights by Israel and spy planes and drones. Interesting graphic there. Iraq national government, they're trying to form a government. They've been trying to form a government for a couple of years now. And of course, here are the militias who might just blow everything up again. Those are Iranian-sponsored militias. And I found this picture to be fascinating today in the Tehran's long shadow. So that's talking about Tehran and what they've done to Syria. In Lebanon, the middle class is leaving Lebanon in droves because there's no hope there. So that's having an impact. So that makes Hezbollah even stronger because they're staying. Look at what this says about Iran's impact on Syria. 50% reduction of Syria's gross domestic product over the last 10 years. 50% proportion of Syrian population now affected by extreme poverty. And 93% of domestic demand for medicines was met by 70 Syrian pharma firms before the war. Now it all comes from, guess where? Iran. And this graphic of Damascus, Tehran's long shadow, I think that's a great, whoever got that picture or made that up did a brilliant job with it. So this is very volatile situation in the world. Couple of articles at Gatestone Institute you should look up. I won't go into them. One is by Richard Kemp from the UK, who talks about let me see, I have it on my iPad, if you give me just a minute here. I'll give you the title. Well, I thought I sent it to myself, but apparently I did not. Oh, let me give you the bullet points of this because I think this is an important thing that relates to the UN. So this is Richard Kemp writing at Gatestone Institute on June 8th. UN will justify a mirror image of Putin's war. This is very interesting. This is a very well thought out article because this is a concern. This is how Ukraine relates to what's going on with Israel and its neighbors. Putin went to war to turn into reality his much repeated insistence that Ukraine was an illegitimate state that has no right to exist and is inseparable from the rest of Russia. Similarly, the UN mandate allows it to question the very existence of the state of Israel. Unlike all other UN inquiries, this report that came out, has no historic time limit and enables the commission to range right back to the foundation of the state of Israel. The commissioners appointed by the UN won't be bold enough to explicitly declare that Israel has no right to exist, but you can be certain that this will be the subtext running throughout the report. Like Putin in Ukraine, Hamas' war against Israel aims to conquer a territory of a sovereign democratic state that it believes should not exist. Both Hamas and Putin's Russia, like most dictatorships, habitually plead self-defense as their justification for aggression. Putin pretends that NATO is a threat to Russia, yet he understands it as a defensive alliance that has no hostile intent. Hamas claims Israeli aggression while knowing that Israel would not and has never used force except in defense of its sovereign land and people. Hamas and Russia share totalitarian values. Both are kleptocracies, both ruthlessly repress internal opposition, and both readily resort to violence, be it political assassination, terrorism, or all-out war. So I think Kemp is doing a good job of drawing the parallels about the concerns about what's going on in Ukraine with what's going on, what could happen, or the justification that could be used in Israel. So look, there's a lot of things to pay attention to. So go to Gatestone Institute, read that. Also read the article that was just published yesterday, I think, about Turkey threatening everybody. And you'll have a good understanding of what's going on in the Middle East. So look, they're, through this ESG, social credit, artificial intelligence, surveillance, they're trying to take control of everything. They're collapsing the economy. Food prices are up. Gas prices are up. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And, at some point, the Lord comes back. But I think you need to prepare. You need to pay attention to what's going on. All of this has huge prophetic implications. So let's pray. As I said, go look at my midweek update on ESG and Saudi Arabia. And if you would, on Rumble, on YouTube, if you would, people keep telling us they get unsubscribed 5 times. Resubscribe, subscribe, like, share. It helps put us in the search rankings. And we do appreciate all of you who take time to watch. So let's pray. Lord, we appreciate, so grateful of the scriptures that you've left us that give us clues as to how to understand and interpret the absolute madness that we see going on in the world around us. And always help us to remember, Lord, that we know that you are in control and that you will guide us by your Holy Spirit. And we pray that all of these things that are prophesied, that you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel, and ultimately that everything will work out exactly as you said, to your glory. We pray that you always help us to keep that in mind. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.